Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is vlog number 54, and in case you missed the last video, I mentioned that I'd be traveling somewhere to find different options for live poker. Sure enough, this is Arizona. More specifically, it's Talking Stick Resort, one of my favorite places to play in all of the entire country. And that's because they have some of the best felt, chips, dealers, staff, etc., you name it, not to mention the deep stacked buy-ins, which I'm a big fan of. Anyway, this is actually going to be a special episode because I popped my head into the poker room downstairs, and it turns out they're offering some different rules during this weird COVID time. They're running 4-handed and 7-handed games. You get the choice between both, but the 7-handed has plexiglass all around the table and it's a regular rake, versus the 4-handed has no glass around the table and it's a maximum of $2 for a rake. So I'm gonna opt for the second option, which I personally think is a much better choice. So this is gonna be a bit of a different vlog. Typically I play in full ring games, which is obviously the norm at most casinos. For those of you who aren't too familiar with short-handed, you actually should be playing a lot more hands than normal, so that's gonna be great for the vlog. And also for my girlfriend Megan, who came with me and unfortunately can't sit behind me and watch me play, which is what she typically likes to do. They're not letting anyone in who's not actually seated at a table. So she's gonna be a champ and hang out in the room for a few hours while I get this vlog on record for you guys. Actually, speaking of, here's the guest of honor who is okay with me leaving her to go gamble like a degenerate.
Yes.
Anyway, so I'm gonna go play some 4-handed poker. Hopefully things go well. I'm gonna be playing like 50% plus of hands. So if things go south, I'll blame it on that. But if things go well, it should be relatively quick because I'll be able to get a lot of material for you guys in like 2 or 3 hours tops. Anyway, let's head downstairs and play some cards. Alright, so here we are, ready to play some 4-handed poker. But before I get into the hands, I wanted to mention a few quick notes. Number one, there's a key difference between this game and those that I play in California, and that is that this is spread limit, which is different than no limit in that there's a maximum amount that you can bet. In this case, it's $600. I'm not sure why it's like this. I think it's something to do with Arizona laws. But anyway, there's a $600 max bet in their 3-5 game, and I think a $300 one in the 2-3 game. Furthermore, in this exact game, which is 4-handed, there's only 1 blind, not 2. So moving forward, if I say big blind, just know that I mean the 1 blind. The reason the game is like this, again, I'm just guessing, but I think it's because people wouldn't want to play a game in which they're in the blinds literally 50% of the time, which would be the case if you had a small and big blind in a 4-handed game. So bear that in mind. There's just 1 blind out there, which means you should actually play a little bit looser because even though there's less money to steal in the blinds, there's only 1 person to get through. Speaking of playing looser, bear in mind that in short-handed poker, you should actually be playing a lot more hands than you otherwise would in a full 9-handed game. So if it seems like my pre-flop selection is kind of crazy, that's because it is. And lastly, the buy-in for this game is a minimum of $500, I believe, and a max of $2,000, and I decided to buy in for $2,000. All right, that's it. Let's get into the hands. In the first hand I play, I get dealt 8-7 offsuit and decide it's good enough for an under-the-gun raise, so I make it $15, and the player on my left re-raises to $55. Action folds back to me, and under normal circumstances, this is a very easy fold, and in fact, not even an open whatsoever from under the gun. But being that we're four-handed and around 400 big blinds deep, I decide to make the call because I feel like my opponent in this case is not the strongest opponent, and maybe I could do some fancy footwork after the flop to win the pot. Anyway, all that being said, I make the call and we go heads up to a flop of ace 5-4 with 2 diamonds. I check it over to him and he puts in a continuation bet of $60. Again, this is another close spot where folding is certainly fine, but because there are so many good turn cards that favor my range more than his, I decide to make the call and see if I can make something happen. Turn card is one of those. It's the 8 of spades, which brings in the most obvious straight draw in 7-6. I check it to him and he puts in a bet of $85 this time. And I think this is the moment that this entire hand is amounting to, because if I was going to make a move, it would have to be on this turn card. There's just so many better hands I'm going to have in this spot than my opponent. He's mostly going to have hands like ace king, ace queen, ace jack, but I'm going to have all the sets, 2 pairs, straights. So I decide to put in a raise to $300. Even if he makes the call here, I feel like it's going to be pretty difficult to hang on with just 1 pair if I make a pretty large bet on the river, which I'm planning on doing. Fortunately, it doesn't come to that because my opponent folds. Probably a little suspect on my part pre-flop, but it worked out in the end. Later on, the cutoff and button limp in, and I look down at ace jack in the big blind. I raise it to $35 and both my opponents make the call. So 3 ways to a flop of queen 7 deuce with 2 hearts. I think you can go either way here. Maybe if I had the ace of hearts instead of the jack of hearts, I prefer starting a bluff, but with my exact hand, I decide to check it and the action checks around. Turn card's the king of clubs. Again, I feel like you can start bluffing here, but against 2 opponents who had shown to be pretty sticky, I decide to just check it again, and the action once again checks all the way around. The river, however, changes things in the magical 10 of spades, giving me the stone cold nuts out of nowhere. I bet $35 since it feels like no one really has much. The cutoff makes the fold, and then the button gives me some good news and makes it $150. A pretty big raise. Unexpected, but certainly welcome. He only has around $700 total, so I decide to just rip all the money in and hope that he has something. If he's bluffing me anyway, there's no point in raising small because he's going to fold no matter what. So I go for the max, and luckily enough, it does turn out my opponent has a strong hand here because he makes the call. I show, and we win a pretty big pot. Unfortunately, because it's spread limit, I could only raise to $635, so my opponent actually gets to keep around $50. But it's hard to complain when you river Broadway and win a bunch of money. In this next hand, I actually missed filming it because I was taking notes about a different hand. It's actually pretty hard to juggle everything at once when you're playing a bunch of hands, but I thought it was important enough to include in the vlog anyway. So here it goes. A few minutes later, the cutoff opens to $20. The button makes the call and I defend the big blind with king 10. The flop comes down king 8-6 with a flush draw. I check, the pre-flop raiser checks, and the button bets $20. I make the call and the cutoff folds. Turn card's the deuce of clubs, which shouldn't really change anything. I check it and the button doesn't slow down. This time he bets $80. Nothing to do here but just make the call, I think, especially considering that this is the opponent I just beat in a large pot, so he could be steaming a little bit. He could have a good hand. Either way, it shouldn't change the way we play this exact hand. The river comes the 4 of hearts. I check it for a 3rd time, and this time he puts in a pretty large bet to the tune of $300. I don't think about it for long and make the call. Despite 7-5 getting there, there's a bunch of other draws that missed, and that's exactly what happens in this case as we get shown 4-3 of diamonds. A missed flush draw that rivers a pair and decides to go for the bluff anyway. Poor guy had no idea that I have a serious problem and don't really know how to fold. A little bit later, 2 of the players are up and walking around, and when you're four-handed, that means you're heads up. So when I get dealt jack deuce offsuit in the button, it's certainly going to be an open since I have one of those cards that has a picture on it. I make it $15 and the big blind makes the call. The flop, I'm not kidding, is deuce, deuce, deuce. The big blind checks, I bet $10 and he raises to $125. All right, I am kidding about that last part. He ended up just folding, but how cool is that? You open a trash hand and just flop quads. A few minutes go by and now we're three-handed again. The under the gun player folds and I raise the button with king 6 offsuit. The big blind makes the call, so we go heads up to a flop of king queen 10 with 2 diamonds. He checks it, I put in a bet of $20 and my opponent makes the call. Turns the deuce of hearts, changes pretty much nothing. When he checks, I put in another bet. There's plenty of pair plus straight draws type holdings that we can get value from. So I make it 50 and once again my opponent makes the call. The river is the 5 of hearts. He checks it for a third time, and under normal circumstances, I think checking here is fine since it seems like we ran out of value, but in this exact scenario where I'd been playing pretty wide and putting a lot of money in every hand, I decided to go for a third street of value because I feel like my opponent will call pretty light here. So I make it 125, but he thinks for a bit and lets it go. It's a little bit thin, but I like thin value bets even if once in a while you're just wrecking yourself. In the next hand, we're still three-handed. There's an under the gun limper, and I raise the button with ace-king. The big blind makes the call, and the limper makes the call. So 3 ways in position to a flop of ace-jack-6 with 2 hearts. Obviously, a great flop for me. The big blind checks, and surprisingly, the under the gun pre-flop limper leads into me for $20. You could go either way here between raising and calling, but I decided to call and try to keep the big blind hopefully in the hand. That doesn't happen though because he makes the fold. So heads up to a turn which is the 7 of hearts. The under the gun player bets again for the same size of $20. This time I am going to be putting in a raise for value with the nut flush draw and top pair top kicker. It seems like a blocker bet to try to see a cheap river. So I raise to 75 and he makes the fold. In short-handed poker, there's a lot of little hands like these, similar to this next one where I open ace-9 offsuit from under the gun, and all 3 of my opponents make the call, so we are four-handed in this hand. Flop comes down ace-10-8 rainbow, checks to me, I decide to check it for balance, everyone checks through. Turns the 5 of diamonds, once again action checks to me. Now that there's more draws to get value from, I bet half pot and only the button makes the call. The river is the 8 of hearts. I check it this time, hoping he'll stab with whatever air he's arrived at the river with. And if he's got a better hand than me, it's a good spot to pot control, but he ends up just checking it back and we win. Nothing happened. However, in this hand, something does happen, even though it's not exactly exciting. There's an under the gun limper, and then the button shoves his short stack in for $46. I'm in the big blind looking down at ace-6 suited. I feel like all 3 options are actually fine here, but I decided on just a call since I feel like the under the gun limper is going to be folding the majority of his holdings. But I was wrong because he actually ends up making the call. So 3 ways here and one player is already all in. So we have a dry side pot here. Flop comes down jack 5-3, all hearts. Obviously I flop nothing, but something I wanted to make a note of is I've seen a lot of people bluff into dry side pots, which just doesn't make too much sense because you have to end up winning against the all-in player anyway. So even if you bluff the other guy out of the pot, you're still going to lose if you can't beat whatever the other guy's got. Anyway, we check it through all the way to the end, and we end up losing against the button anyway, who shows queen 5 offsuit. Great hand for a triple up. In the next one, there's an under the gun limper, and I raise to 25 with pocket 4s. The button makes the call, and everyone else folds. So heads up to a delicious looking flop of 5-5-4. So we flop a full house here. I check it, and my opponent checks it back. One quick note about me checking here, shitty play. If I was going to get deceptive, I prefer betting the flop and then checking the turn. But anyway, I decided to check this time because this guy had been putting in a lot of money when people check to him. Of course, this time he owns me and just checks back. Turn card's the deuce of spades, bringing in some more straight draws and flush draws. This time I am going to put some money in, $35, and the button makes the call, which is great. The river is the queen of clubs, and it's a decision between checking and hoping he bluffs or just betting and hoping he has something to call with. A few months ago, I used to always go for a check call or check raise, but lately I've been thinking, well, if I'm going to be bluffing rivers, I should also be betting for value since this is a card I would be bluffing a lot on. So I just put in a bet of $100, but it doesn't seem to matter at all because he makes the fold pretty quickly. In the last hand we'll go over, I look down at queen 9 suited from under the gun, raise it to $15 and get called by the button and big blind. So 3 ways to a flop here of 6-7-3 with 2 diamonds. Action checks to me and I put in a bet of $20. The button makes the call and the blind folds. Turn is the 9 of clubs, so to go along with our flush draw we now have top pair. I continue betting for $60 and the button makes the call. The river improves our hand yet again. It's the jack of diamonds, so we make a queen high flush. I decided to bet $75 because I think this sizing will induce a raise from any bluffs or value hands he has, but also get called by marginal showdown hands. Indeed, that's what ends up happening because my opponent thinks for a while and eventually makes what looks like an annoying call, which means we are good, and we're gonna collect the last hand of the night here. After playing for around 3 hours, I decide to rack up and head back upstairs. I hope you guys enjoyed the short-handed fun.
You breathing in and out of my
So back at the room, and as you guys saw, it was a fairly good night for myself. I was in for 2,000, luckily never had to rebuy, and cashed out for a little over 4,000 for a nice healthy profit of $2,000 in about 3 hours or so. So no complaints in that department. I'm gonna spend some time with Megan now. So no complaints at all as far as the results go. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the hands. I had a blast playing four-handed. Anyway, who knows where the vlog will go from here. I don't really know where the vlog is gonna go next because a new poker room is opening, it seems like every week or so. So just stay tuned and I'll see you guys soon. Thank you for watching. Thanks for all the support. And if you give this video a thumbs up, I really appreciate it because it helps the channel grow quite a bit. Good luck at the tables and I'll see you all next time. Peace.